I had picked up a tiny statue of the Madonna and Child. It was about a foot high, slender and delicate. The heads of the Madonna and the infant were missing, shot off. This struck me as pathetic, ironic, somehow pictorial of the whole scene. It symbolized in a poetic way the futility of civil wars, the futility of wars of any kind. When I returned from abroad, the Knights of Columbus accused me of being a dangerous radical. It happens that in America, if you bear the name of Flynn and you achieve some prominence, the Catholic Church is going to get interested in you. Along the line somewhere, they found I had no identification with the Catholic Church. I was simply a guy named Flynn. If that was my name, what was I doing on the Republican side? There were even editorials about me. What was I? An actor? What was I? An actor? Doing sticking my nose into the affairs of another country? Well, a lot of Americans did this. They believed they did it in a just cause. This was an historic moment in the history of the world between World War I and World War II. I tried to get publication for my impressions of Spain. What I had to say was apparently slanted with loyalist sympathy, for there was a surprising lack of interest amongst many in high circles and at the most prominent publications. Before I went to Spain, I saw Franklin D. Roosevelt, Jr., from time to time. He had all the charm and good looks of his father. He was a fine athlete. He had a good sense of humor. As a result of my friendship with Franklin, who was about my age, I was invited to the White House from time to time. I had already met the president. Now, back from Europe and visiting my Aunt Betty, who lived in Washington, I was invited to come to the White House for one of their regular Sunday evening social rituals. I told Mrs. Roosevelt of my difficulties in getting publication for what I had witnessed in Spain. She said it was an outrage that my material had not been published and couldn't get published. She had much interest in what I had to say. I don't say sympathy, but she had much interest in anyone who took up the Republican cause. The president came in on his wheelchair, and he sat at the head of the long table. About were the Roosevelt family, many notables, government people, visitors. Mrs. Roosevelt herself brought in a big platter of scrambled eggs. She prepared this herself and did it magnificently. The president took one or two old fashions, his favorite drink, but no more. He had such a sparkling gaiety about him, and the whole family seemed to be in a distinct contrast to the physical condition he was in. He had more charm and magnetism than I ever found in anyone in Hollywood. The president seemed to like me. He gave me a fine painting of himself inscribed to me, and he liked to ask questions about motion picture making. When he had a good word to say about my own work, I deprecated what he said. "Why are you so damned modest?" he said. Franklin, Jr., tore into his father. So did James and Eliot. The president had recently said publicly that the borders of America were on the banks of the Rhine, and he was being widely criticized for this. The president listened with an amused and tolerant smile as his sons lit on him. It was like a pack of little hounds baying at the old dog. He had an answer for everything. When he finished handling that, he mentioned that he had just had a dream about this same political question. "You know," said the president, "I dreamed I was sitting there with Mussolini and Hitler, the three of us." Mussolini said, "Italy will extend her borders to Abyssinia and beyond, God willing." Hitler said, "And Germany will extend her borders all over Europe, God willing." And I replied, "But gentlemen, I am not." I have always resented that the artist should be relegated by the politician to a place with no voice in political or human affairs. The politician and even the press seem to feel that the artist should have a lesser voice than others in public affairs. It is a little unfair of the world and its leaders to think that we who entertain are marionettes to be tossed about at the end of their string and to be told to do and say what they think we should do and say. Authority and philosophy and truth reside in their hands, ours to entertain, not to reason why, just to let them continue to make the mess of the world which they have made. In the history of man, the entertainer has often achieved a position in the public mind that perhaps is or is not deserving. He has a stature that in many cases has put him apart from politics, and in many cases has put him into politics. Spartacus, a gladiator of ancient Rome, led a revolt of slaves. History still remembers it. Paderewski, the pianist, became a leader of Poland. Shaleipin would certainly, if he wanted to, have had nearly as big a voice as Trotsky in the Russian Revolution, but he chose to remain an artist. I am quite sure that if Will Rogers had wanted to run for high office, he would have secured it. In my case, curiosity is a sickness. It gets me into all my troubles and experiences. It got me into Spain, and more recently into the Cuban situation. I'm quite capable of doing my own thinking and my own living, and I don't need somebody somewhere running some jerk organization to tell me what is right and wrong and where my province ends and his begins. My province as a human is the same as yours. It's the world. Back in New York, I still felt in no shape to resume work. A lot of paychecks had accumulated for me, but I told Warner's I was not ready to return to the studio. Again, Lily and I were reconciled. I decided I would introduce her to my greatest love, the wide ocean, which no woman has ever been able to compete with for all my affections. My only real happiness is when I'm near the sea. Cut off from the beach, away from the sea, I am nervous and I fret. I'm never happy in a big city, only for a week or two of violent living. I've tried it time and again, but it has never worked. My lifeline has always been a boat down by the waterfront. I had heard of the Caribbean as a world of beauty similar to the South Pacific, which had spawned me. We went to Boston. There, I bought a sailboat. You should never rename a boat. I gave the mistake of renaming this one. I called it the Sirocco, giving it the same name as the one I owned in New Guinea. I set sails for a trip down the Atlantic coast to the islands of the West Indies. In Havana, I struck up with a wonderful fellow, tall and good-looking, named Pancho Arano, since dead. He typified a Spanish Don. His family had been there for centuries, one of the ancient Cuban families. Yet he looked less like a Cuban than any I ever saw. He had a long, aquiline face, startling blue eyes. He was the physical prototype of a man who could have been leaning over the shoulder of one of El Greco's priests. As wicked a man as I ever met, and, as is usual with such people, totally charming. I was fighting with Lily again, so I decided I must get away from her for a few hours or a day. I looked up Pancho. The Cubans, particularly the playboy millionaire class there, live a special life. I like it. I quickly learned from Pancho, and the first thing I did was to hire an orchestra to follow me everywhere I went. The musicians were picturesque, toothless, almost clothless. They wore battered straw hats, gaudy neckcloths, battered shirts, torn, unpressed pants through which you could see their thighs, knees, buttocks. But they could string and strum stringed instruments. You understand, I said to them in my imperfect Spanish when I hired them. If you are ever out of my sight or sound, the deal is off. You're fired. Sí, Errol. They were delighted to be the personal band of a movie star. I was set. Now for the action. Pancho, who's the honey-haired beauty over there? Ah, you wish to meet Miss Gonzalez. She is from one of the best boss families. She was in her 20s, unmarried, her family fabulously rich, and she was untouchable in the Spanish style. You had to pay your compliments from a distance to a woman of this class. I was married, and there was little I could do about it. She was aloof, but friendly, and she spoke fluent English. I learned that she could swim, play tennis. I was attracted highly, for it was rarely that a Cuban girl could do anything athletically. I was always looking for athletic girls, soulmates to do rough and ready things with me on land or sea, like my male pals had always been able to do, but I found few of them. I managed to inveigle her to a lunch, itself a conquest, for anything like a date after 5 o'clock was looked upon askance, but an assignation for a lunch wasn't so bad. I took her to a restaurant. I was full of teeth and charm. I put it on like butter. I tried to be like a hero in one of my current hits. The Moro crab came, hard shell. I spun what I thought was an amusing story. I was the essence of Gallic wit. Then I heard a pop. It reverberated through my head. The hard shell. The next thing, a front tooth popped out of my mouth and landed on the tablecloth. It rolled around indecisively and came to rest, plunk in the center of a red square on the tablecloth. And there it was between us. She looked at it. I looked. She stared at me. I stared at her. The romance was dying under our very gaze. My tongue went up and found the big space in the front of my mouth, on the face of a man already famous for his toothy smile. From then I had to finish the story with tight lips, but this is no way to be a raconteur. So ended the affair before it began. I ran over to a dentist, who put in another phony chopper. My morale was low. I turned to Pancho for other amusement. "Ha, Errol, I know just the thing." He knew, he said, where the most beautiful girls in the world were. A whole house full of them. They were not the usual run-of-the-mill ladies of the night, or putas, as the Cubans called their whores. The madam, he said, was an old friend, and she would take the finest care of us. He went on rapturously to describe the handsomeness and the gifts of the young ladies. We were already cruising along a quiet street, mid-afternoon, headed for this place, with my orchestra piled in the back seat. Pancho ran out of vocabulary, Spanish and English, to describe the joys awaiting us, and at that impasse we arrived. Sure enough, as Pancho said, they were beautiful girls. As we entered, a charming lady came towards us. She welcomed her old customer, Pancho. She was delighted and flattered when she learned who I was, and the next thing I noticed, Pancho was at it. He had girls under his armpits, girls under his crotch, girls behind his ears, girls under his feet. I was stunned. Reclining in a bed, thoroughly absorbed, his two hands behind his head, he beckoned. "Come on, Errol. Get into these." Yet it was the kind of maelstrom I couldn't get into. I looked on with a sort of tearful wonder and envy. You're dressed. The other guy is naked. Everybody else is naked. This makes you feel like an awful fool. You wonder what to do. The orchestra was strumming light Spanish-Cuban airs. This went on for a time, with me wandering around like a sheepish schoolgirl, unable to get in the act, and Pancho laughing at me. This was upsetting because I was shocked, appalled, yet intrigued. I had the normal inhibitions of a man who has been beset by every possible convention, fear and caution, but the biological nature of me sought always to push through these barriers. One thing I knew I could do. I could buy champagne. That's the answer. Buy champagne. So the champagne kept coming. The music played, and this kept me off the hook for my non-participation. Meanwhile, Pancho continued, the recipient of the infinite favors that a full-scale seraglio could provide. I glanced his way occasionally, drank some champagne, offered it to the madam, poured it for the girls. Once, Pancho tossed the girls off like flies and growled in Spanish about my generosity with the drinks. He shall not pay! He shall not pay! The girls recoiled for a minute at his surge of temper, but only for a minute. It was now about 5 o'clock. I knew I was in the doghouse with Lily. I could see her pacing the deck of the Sirocco, waiting for my return, perhaps with a belaying pin in her dainty fingers. I felt I had to go back if I were to avoid another terrible scene with her. Yet, as I drank, I got braver by the instant. This has always happened to me. Only a glass or two of champagne, and I was thinking, by God, if I could get that one with the big breasts and the little feet. Just then, I heard a strange noise outside, a human cry, not altogether unfamiliar. I thought I heard my name. "What's that, Pancho?" I asked. He pushed aside the girls, forwards, backwards, left, right, and went rushing to the window. "Ha, viejo," which meant old boy. "They know you. They love you." "Who loves me? How?" "Leasing." The noise outside grew stronger. Pancho at the window, thoroughly nude, looked down. They know you're here." "Who's they?" "All you have to do is listen." Then I heard, "Bravo, Errol, viejo! Errol, vien aquí!" "Come on." The shouting increased. I went to the window and looked below. There I saw an entire girls' school assembled. They were from a convent directly across the road from the bordello. There they were, even the sisters, all wearing uniforms, and they were lined up across the whole front of the whorehouse. Some of the girls were dancing. "Bravo, Errol, bravo!" I quickly pulled the shade down. Panic hit me, square in the guts. There had never been any bad publicity about me. There had been nothing in my private life that anyone out there knew about. Warner Brothers had no difficulties with me along this line. Yet, I was in no way implicated in anything. This situation was a threat to my career. I went pale. I thought of my father, working sedulously at his experiments in embryology, the scientist disgraced by his errant son. What if he heard that a crowd of schoolgirls in a Cuban convent had declared a holiday and filed across the street to cheer up at me on the balcony of this place? I turned around to face that rascal Pancho. "A girls' school?" I hissed. "Look at them." He was half doubled in laughter, murmuring, "They love you, they love you. Tremendous Errol." Like an Academy Award, only different. By God, Pancho, this may be funny to you, but not to me. I babbled about the dangerous wife I had, but wives meant nothing to him, and he kept breaking through his laughter about how Cuba was honoring me. "You get it, Errol. They will speak about these in the school books of Cuban history." And he fell back on the bed, lanky legs in the air, and laughed like mad. "I must get out of this, Pancho." He was right side again on the bed's edge. "Don't be silly. Nobody cares. This is Cuba." "I care." I left plenty of money for everybody around and said, "I must go." I couldn't get out the front way to my cab, not with those girls lined up a block deep. I didn't know the back way, but I knew there must be one, because I'd never been in a place of the sort yet where there wasn't. I was moving. Cuban houses are built in squares. There's a patio with each. There's a barricade wall between each little home. I knew if I could get up one of these walls between the houses, run across a couple of roofs, I had done this before, I could find a way out. I found the patio. It had been drizzling a bit. This made wet rain pipe, which I tried to climb. The pipe collapsed, and I fell right on my arse, flat on the patio again. It was an 18-foot climb, but fear and panic made me try to make the top. I was out of breath, but inspired. Then, thinking I was my own double. I had no stand-in. I actually got up that wall. I made it like a car with a long running leap, a pipe, another vine, a crack in the wall. I was up there. I jumped over to a flat roof. I ran over the roof, trying to make the opposite side of this building, where I figured to get down, leap into a taxi, and be gone. But the Cuban architecture got in my way. I had to keep leaping barricades, the kind they have in these Cuban houses. I swiftly got out of breath. I was dirtied, my white sharkskin and suit in tatters, out at the elbows, out at the knees. I must have looked like some kind of assassin. Suddenly, I fell into a kitchen down about 10 feet and landed on the floor. My legs sprawled out in front of me. I stared up at a nice fat old colored lady who was cooking. I looked desperate. I felt desperate. I hurt. Psst. She wasn't cooperative. She let out a scream, looked around for help. I stood. I said, "Senora, por favor." She didn't listen. She dumped her stuff on the stove and ran. 3 little kids came into the kitchen. They screamed. I tried to hush them. They yelled louder. Abruptly, I was confronted by the toughest-looking Cuban I ever saw. He was in shirt sleeves. He had just got up from his dinner, or whatever he was having. I understood his Spanish more from his tone. "What are you doing here?" How was I to tell him? "Senor, you speak English?" "No, little." "Excuse me, I just want to get down the street. I have had a bad experience. May I please use your door? I beg your pardon to be here. I am very sorry." He pulled out a gun. You must remember that this was just after one of Batista's coups. There was a lot of trouble all over, cloak and dagger stuff, and most Cubans were in politics. So someone falling into his kitchen, looking like me, breathless, would make any householder nervous. He was jittery enough to cock his revolver. I said quickly, "Por favor, no. Please let me get down to the street." "Who are you? Rebel Americano?" "No, I'm in trouble." "I got trouble too. How you get here?" "I promise you. Just show me the way to the door." Here his little daughter, aged 10 or 12, came to my help. "Oh, look, look," in a high-pitched voice. "Captain Blood." They all looked. The guy with the revolver stared me up and down. His gun was wavering. Was this true? "You, Captain Blood?" he asked. "Yes." The little girl stuck her hand in mine. "Oh," she kept saying, delighted. Here, the guy put his pistol away. "You must have dinner, you must." No, I couldn't. Then they said I could go. They'd show me the way. At last I was free. At last I had escaped the horrible scandal of being caught in a hook shop across from a convent. The papers would never get it. My father would never learn of it. Warner Brothers would never know. They led me down the stairs, opened the door. There they all were again, the same people. They had just gone around the block. Even my orchestra was out there waiting for me. I had gone through this horrible mess only to run into them again. The howls were just as steady. "Captain Blood! Errol Flynn!" So I just took the bows. What else? I passed through them, signing autographs. The little girl who first spotted me kept shouting at my side till she was hoarse. "Errol Flynn!" I signed my name for one of the sisters on her collar. The last thing I saw, there in the street, was Pancho, literally with his hands on his knees, still howling his Cuban head off. He was enchanted with this whole thing, endlessly amused by my morality, as if it were some disgrace to be caught like this. How funny, he kept saying, that I was worried what father might say. Today, of course, I wouldn't care who caught me in a whorehouse. Sometimes I think I would like to end my days in one.